Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of The Thing About Wildlife in a Nutshell, where you will be hearing a bite-sized story from our guest wildlifers' time in their field. Our lives among nature tend to be a string of funny, intimidating, or simply absurd anecdotes, and I'm going to be bringing these to you through some wonderfully diverse and fascinating voices. Today, you'll be listening to a conversation I had with Dr. Nitya Prakash Mohanty, who you may remember from season 1. He is a herpetologist who has spent the last decade studying frogs and lizards, and he continues to ask very, very interesting questions about invasive species and, more recently, how different animals sleep in different conditions. And ever since our last conversation, now over a year ago, he has been doing some incredible stuff looking at sleep patterns in lizards, and he was so eager to share it with you. And so, if you don't know about the rest of the work he's done, I would highly recommend giving a quick listen to his episode in season 1. Although it's not essential to this snippet of conversation, but it is truly fascinating work. And so I was very excited to reconnect with Nitya and have him chat to us about some of the really cool stuff he's doing now and tell us a lot more about what he has learned in this time. And he was just as excited to do so. So in our conversation this time round, Nitya told me a little bit more about the work that he's just published, which featured in an academic journal, which I am linking down in the show notes below. If you want to know a little more about exactly what questions he asked and the results they found. But we're going to stick to some of the more fun stories for today's episode. But just for you to know what we're talking about, here's Nitya telling us a little bit more about the study species that was involved in this project.
We use the model system of urban lizard, which is Samophilus dorsalis, or the peninsular rock agama, also known as the South Indian rock agama. It is really well known. It's very iconic to this part of India because it has really bright colors. Like the male has a really bright red, orange to yellow to black variation. It has two bands, like a dorsal, like on the back, and the two on the sides. So these change differently, and these are related to the signals for the females and males. So when they want to breed, they turn red and black. When they want to signal aggression, competition, or stress, they turn yellow and red.
Now that you know what species he was studying, here's Nitya telling us a very quick snippet about what he found.
So what we found, which was quite shocking to be honest, was that they are 9 times more likely to sleep in a sheltered site, a covered site in cities as compared to the natural site. So it's not like the behavior is completely new in cities. They do sometimes sleep covered by shrub on a rock in natural areas as well, but that could be to limit some natural illumination on full moon nights, or that could also be a measure for to avoid predators. But we don't know. Like, we think as long as you're immobile, you should be okay. But why are some of them covered still at night in rural areas where there's no light, artificial light at night? We don't know. So pretty much they mirror the sleep sites, the properties of the sleep sites in the natural areas.
Now that we have that context, you can just tell us a little more about what fieldwork actually was like. because it sounds really interesting to listen to this in a more theoretical way. And yes, it's definitely interesting from a research standpoint ki what is happening when we're actually sleeping, and to extend that to how other animals are coping with urbanization. But to actually make this happen, the fieldwork must be very interesting, very unlike anything that people may think of and you think, oh, we're trying to understand how they sleep, but maybe it's more fancy in their heads or something like that. But yeah, just like break that down for us. Like what actually happens? Walk us through that.
Yeah, ecological research rarely is, you know, actually very dull and very repetitive and very drab with a lot of sweat involved. Uh, it is definitely it's far removed from what people imagine wildlife research is sometimes. So for this study, we had to loiter in people's backyards, avoid cops, avoid some snakes, but I think they were terrifying in that order. Because we wanted to compare how where they sleep in the natural sites to where they sleep in the city, because the sleep site that you choose can be very crucial because it has to keep you safe, because you are in a state of you're in a vulnerable state, right? You're not able to react to predators as quickly as you would during active hours. So you need to choose a sleep site that gives you safety from predators, and for many lizards, heat, opportunity for maintaining adequate body heat at night. So passively even, by just touching the substrate, the lizard can heat up, right? So it needs ideal structural and thermal environment. And in a city, you have lots of light, which is one of the major things to change when massive human habitation happens, right? And artificial light at night is particularly bad for lizard sleep, we think, because they have a pineal eye or a third eye which is exposed, and that is highly light sensitive, or scientists call it photosensitive. So for lizards, it might be even a bigger factor to consider when choosing where to sleep, in comparison to structural and thermal and parameters. So this lizard, we would have to go and search in the streets of Bangalore, in the colonies of Bangalore. And so this lizard, we knew from before that it takes advantage of these empty residential plots, and because there are walls around, concrete walls around, made up of this, very typical to this region, is concrete cinder blocks wall, and which are many times just left as is, unplastered and unpainted. And as fate would have it for this lizard, it actually benefits them a lot. It's very similar to the rocky boulders in terms of the substrate, the coarseness of the substrate. It's very similar to their natural habitats, which are rocky boulders in the outskirts of Bangalore. So we got to go there to rocky outskirts such as Kolar and Avati, and these landscapes are stunning, like really stunning. You'll have to see it to believe it, that such a thing, such a stunning landscape can actually be just within 100 kilometers, 60 kilometers from a major city. And the rocky boulders, really large ancient rock formations, which still exist, and these lizards inhabit them, as is evident from their name, right? The rock agamas. So definitely not aquatic. So although they do swim sometimes in rock pools, yeah, I've seen them. getting a dunk, or when we chase them at night, sometimes they can get into pools if they escape from us.
Wow.
So yeah, so we got to go to Scenic landscape, which practically had no disturbances. They would have a village in the distance, but otherwise there's no artificial light. At night is at 0 lux on our lux meter, and then didn't have noise. It didn't have any other disturbances, and it had rocky natural landscapes. Um, and then we had these empty lots in residential properties, and we'll obviously our sampling strategy was to scan everywhere possible, even on the ground, because we don't know where this species sleeps at all, and this information is actually missing for many species around the world. Actually, the, I would say 95% of the species don't have this data. So in a recent review that we did, we found there is some sleep information in 342 species of lizards, but of reptiles overall, including snakes, turtles, everything, crocodiles. So in this study, what was fun, I would say, was going to this really rocky landscapes, and what was scary and fun was in these cityscapes. So I'll share some anecdotes with you, some stories where we managed to come out of unscathed. So we have been because our sampling had to be carried out at night, so we would start at 7:30 up to 9:30, because we also don't want to overdo it and go really long into the night, because we also have observer fatigue, because we are scanning very slowly in detail the entire habitat. Like there's walls, there are shrubs around it, there are trees, because we don't know if they actually use any of these sites to sleep. We're looking for crevices in these walls, because these concrete walls have a very peculiar feature. They have crevices at systematic distances. Right? So every 10 meters you have this blank crevice, which is really there's a gap between the two parts of the brick, and then between two bricks, and then you have this nice crevice for the lizards to sleep in. So we will have to check there. And what that meant was that time also coincided with the time of people sitting in their living room and watching TV, catching their daily soap or binging something. And they would they would see these three people in the backyard. They have headlamps on, they have light, and they're like talking to each other slowly, and there are like red lights coming on at certain points. So they most times they're curious, and sometimes they're curious and a bit scared. So they shout at us and they're like, "What are you doing?" And all of this is in Kannada, which I don't understand very well. But my friend and my co-author on this paper, Mihir Joshi, he did, and that was a huge help. Otherwise, we would have been in prison a few times at least. And then because it's very scary to find people, but they're always sweet, and we had to do a lot of psychom on the way. Just as we went along, we would just chat to people, ask them permission to access their properties and look at lizards there, and so on. But people are very welcoming and tolerant, and very curious, and even shared their stories. A couple of times, I think we got stopped by cops, and got asked, "What are you guys up to?" But once we explained it, we just let off with a warning out of concern that don't go into those lots. There are many snakes, and we would explain. We are fairly well prepared. We have large shoes, like really nice shoes on. So hopefully that protects us. But yeah, it involved a lot of what they call in South Africa is bunda bashing. is going through hedges, and when you're in forest and trying to come out, it's called bunda bashing.
Okay.
And so we just would trample through places. And some of Bangalore's empty residential lots, you don't want to know what's inside.
Oh no.
It's highly toxic.
Oh gosh.
And I don't even want to paint you a word picture.
That's a good warning for anyone listening.
Absolutely. There's a reason. There's no house built there.
Oh, super. Amazing. So then at the end of all of this, what did you actually end up learning about how lizards sleep and what they're actually up to at night or not up to at night?
Nice. So what we had expected was that lizards would definitely try to retain similar structure and thermal environment of their natural sites as well as light environment. They should be trying to sleep in conditions which are as natural to them, which are very similar to the natural population. But so this would entail is actually finding substrate that is similar in terms of structure and temperature, but also finding a way to avoid the all-pervasive night light that we have in cities. And what we found was that they do actively limit the amount of light that their sleep site has. So behaviorally, they are choosing sites which are slightly covered, like partially or fully covered. So what do I mean by covered is they mostly sleep on rocky substrate, at least the majority, I think 95-96% of the adults sleep on rocks, and some of them sleep on plants, but it's generally they're too heavy probably to sleep on these shrubs, but the juveniles tend to sleep a lot on plants. So what we found was they would sleep on rocky substrate, that is this concrete walls that is their savior in Bangalore, and they cling to that vertically. I think that limits what predators can approach them. So their mid wall hanging vertically, it's like, and in natural sites they hang from these rock faces. So it's probably very difficult for many predators to get to them. And as long as they're immobile, they are actually safe from many nocturnal predators, many nocturnal bird predators, for example. So as long as you don't move, you're fairly secure. And they do blend in. Like, we found them only because we're looking for them, but maybe cats also look for them, who knows. So what we found was that they would sleep on these rocky substrate, which is concrete walls in urban environments, but these would be covered by either vegetation on most occasions, but we also had artificial substrate like a tarpaulin sheet or a metal sheet, or a concrete slab, something like that. And once we actually found a group of lizards sleeping together under this concrete slab somewhere in Sakar Nagar, Bangalore. And people are obviously completely oblivious to where they're at night. They know they're around during the day because they're very bright in color, as I said, and they're signaling to their fellows conspecifics. But these lizards, they also tend to do this really interesting thing, which is sleep together. They sleep together sometimes, and this social behavior is actually way more at night than you would ever see during the day. During the day, they're mostly alone, and they're fighting with males sometimes for territory and courting females. You do see some females and juveniles together, I think, very early on, but after that there is none of this social or co-sleeping or bonding, right? So at night it's co-sleeping, and they probably do that because it's safer to sleep in a group. We nap so well when we are at home because there's a chatter in the background that the people up and alert. So if you're sleeping in a group, if somebody gets disturbed, everybody can be alerted immediately. And or the second thing could be sometimes it is like a male courting a female, and they are together for that part of the breeding season. Sometimes females, juveniles. We found juvenile clusters as well. So it and to do with thermoregulation to keep each other warm on a rainy night in Bangalore. So yeah, very cool lizards, and this is only the surface of their sleeping behavior. We haven't even begun to understand what aspects of sleep behavior change in response to urbanization, and generally and what it means to the ecology. So lots to do.
So I'm particularly fascinated by some of these more social things, that you were saying, because I'm also very interested in general in culture, whether it's people or animals. There's so much culture everywhere, and you always talk about it in these quote unquote higher species, right? And it's always mammals.
Right.
But from what you're saying, even though we don't yet know the answer, you've just, like you said, you found signs of it maybe, but you've not confirmed that this is all sociality. But what do you think? Okay, even if you put your data hat off and just think about it from your gut or from your own, imagination, because I'm sure you've thought about it. What do you think is happening? Do you think they are able to communicate to each other in certain ways about what behaviors are safe, about what they ought to be doing? Is they are coming together more planned? Is it incidental? Do they happen to find these places conducive individually, or have they told each other that, hey, this is a place we can do it? And it's also very cool because, like you said, during the day they're kind of on their own, they're very territorial, they're displaying, signaling. So what do you think is going on? What does Nitya think? Not Nitya the scientist necessarily, but...
Yeah, glad you had that disclaimer, because I was going to give you a mini review on what other people have said in the past and hypothesize as to what is the reason that we see sociality or aggregation at least in many species, many reptiles that too, which are not so social during the day. So this there are many studies which already show that this is done for this benefit, or like thermal benefit in marine iguanas, or lesser disease, sometimes counterintuitively, but it actually happens in marine iguanas. And then you have this sort of theories or hypothesis that it's for temperature or reducing diseases, but also it's just because the sites are optimal sites, ideal sleep sites are limited. Imagine there was only one safe room in your whole house. Let's say your house is haunted for the purposes of this story. Then you have only one room to sleep which is safe, and you will all huddle together, right? There's no point risking your life sleeping in a suboptimal sites, haunted by many ghosts, high density of ghosts. So there are already many ideas, but there's very little empirical data to say which is what. And I'm pretty sure that all of these probably happen in different contexts, where one selection pressure is higher. If there is really, let's say, it's really cold place and you need to sleep in a huddle to actually conserve heat, that's probably more important in that context than these other possible contexts. So I think probably all of these happen, and some things that we haven't really found yet, so which way does this go in terms of, because some species are also social during the day and they sleep in the same burrows, say some skinks in Australia, and they are sometimes pair bonded for the whole season, for the whole year, and they are a couple who has a nice burrow to sleep in, and they're together. So who drives who? Is there initially more incentive to sleep together, co-sleep at night, and therefore that bonding at night also promotes more bonding during the day, or is it the other way around, that they courted each other, the male courted the female during the day, and they decided to Netflix and chill?
I love chatting with Nitya again, and I'm sure he's going to find his way back into other seasons with more exciting work. So we'll come back with more soon, with a new speaker next week, and looking forward to seeing you then. Thanks for listening.